All right, let's jump right in. What if I told you that the word church might not mean what we've always thought it means? Today, we're going to peel back the layers on this word, go back to the source, and uncover its original identity. And what we find might just surprise you. It's a story that's way less about religion than you'd think, and a whole lot more about politics and social revolution. So let's just do a quick thought experiment. When I say the word church, what's the very first thing that pops into your head? Just picture it for a second. For a lot of us, it's probably a building, right? Maybe it's got a big steeple, or maybe you're thinking of a Sunday service, the music, the sermon. Could be a community of people who believe the same things, or maybe it's the rituals and ceremonies. Whatever it is you're picturing, hold on to that thought, because we're about to see how it compares to the original idea. Okay, so our journey back in time, it really starts with just one single word. The original Greek word that was used, and this is the key that unlocks this whole thing. And that word is ekklesia. Now, if you break it down, it comes from two Greek parts, ek, which means out, and kaleo, which means to call. So pretty literally, it means the called out ones. But, that just begs the question, right? Called out from what? And called out to do what? And this is where our modern definition really starts to wobble. See, the thing is, Ekklesia wasn't just some generic word for a get-together. According to the experts, the big Greek dictionaries, it was a very specific technical term. It meant a formal legislative assembly. Think of it like a city council meeting or a town hall where citizens were officially called together to run the affairs of their city. So let that sink in for a second. This was a political word. To anyone hearing this in the first century, Ekklesia screamed government, citizenship, and public duty. It was absolutely not about a private religious club. So why on earth would they pick such a politically loaded word? Well, to get that, we have to drop ourselves right into the middle of the first century world. Judea back then, it was this pressure cooker of political ideas. You had all these different factions, you've probably heard of them, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Zealots, and they all acted kind of like modern political parties, each one with a totally different idea of how the country should be run, all fighting for power and influence. So in that kind of super politicized environment, to stand up and call your movement an ekklesia, wow, that was a huge deliberate statement. You weren't saying we're hiding from society. You were announcing the arrival of a brand new kind of public body with its own unique way of governing. Okay, so if the Ekklesia was a form of government, what kind of government was it? Well, according to our source material, it was a model so radical, it basically flipped every other government on the planet completely upside down. And you can see this incredible contrast laid out right in the Gospel of Matthew. On one hand, you have worldly governments. Their whole deal is to exercise dominion and exercise authority. It's all top-down rule. But then you get this new model, and the instruction is literally, it shall not be so among you. Instead, if you want to be great, you become a minister. If you want to be the chief, you become a servant. It's a complete inversion of power. So the source we're looking at, it actually calls this early ekklesia a sovereign state. But here's the kicker. It was a state where its public servants, its ministers, were strictly forbidden from exercising authority over anyone. The entire point wasn't to rule people, it was to serve them, to make them free. And this naturally leads the source to ask a really pointed question, something for us to think about too. It's asking us to look at the systems we're a part of, all of them, and ask ourselves, are they built on this model of service, or are they built on exercising dominion over us? All right, so if this government didn't rule, what did it do? What was its day-to-day job? Well, the source argues its main function was to provide a social service that was, frankly, a matter of life and death. Okay, so here's the backstory, and it's critical. When the first Christians were put out of the synagogues, this wasn't just like being kicked out of a club. It was a huge deal. They were immediately cut off from the existing welfare system, something called korban, which was run by the Pharisees. That was the safety net for the poor, for widows, and suddenly it was gone for them. So, faced with this massive crisis, what did the Ekklesia do? They built their own system from scratch. They organized themselves into congregations, they appointed these servant ministers we talked about, and they created what was called the daily ministration, a direct social safety net for anyone in need. But here's the most important part. It was funded 100% by voluntary charity. No taxes, no mandatory tithes.
And this table just lays out how revolutionary this was. You had the Roman state, which provided free bread, but that was an expression of government power, a way to keep people happy. You had the Pharisees' temple system, Corban, which was based on religious duty and obligation. But the Ecclesia's daily ministration was totally different. The source actually calls it pure religion, for one simple reason. It ran entirely on free will charity and people genuinely taking care of each other.
All right, let's pull all these threads together. Let's look at the massive contrast our source material is drawing between that original Ekklesia and what we often think of as church today. I mean, look at this. It really summarizes the whole argument. The source claims the very meaning of the word shifted from a political legislative assembly to a private religious society. The leadership model changed from ministers who serve to rulers who exercise authority. The primary function changed from being a real-world social welfare system to being about rituals and ceremonies. And even the fundamental structure changed from being a sovereign independent society to, well, often being an organization under the power of the state. And all of this leads to the source's really bold, really challenging conclusion. It argues that the difference between the original and the modern is so huge that the modern church is in a state of apostasy. And what that means is a total abandonment of its original principles and its very purpose. So, if there's one thing to take away from all this, according to our source, it's this. The original church, the Ekklesia, wasn't defined by what people believed in their heads. It was defined by what they did for each other in the real world. It was a living, breathing system of mutual care, paid for by nothing but love and charity, that acted as the government for a community of free people. And so, we're left with one last, very provocative question that really gets to the heart of everything we've just talked about. If an organization calls itself a church, but it doesn't actively provide for the real-world needs of its community through pure, free-will charity, then based on this original definition, is it a church at all? Something to think about. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.